The third in a series of temporary homeless shelters opens downtown today as the city deals with the ongoing dual crises of homelessness and hepatitis A.
I was basically told that it was important that I accept the fact that I was ill, accept the fact that, that was who I was now, and told that I could never work again.
Patients who suffer from mental illness often deal with biases against them, sometimes even within the healthcare system.
The probabilities of any of them still being alive would be slim to none, but I could give them to a relative, and they could see their hero when my father saw them.
And the son of a soldier and artist on a quest to reconnect the past with the present. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Dozens of homeless families started settling into large industrial tents in San Diego's East Village today. It's the third such tent the city has opened over the past several weeks. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy has more from downtown.
These doors are opening just in time for the dozens of families moving in this week. Rain and cool temperatures are expected starting early next week. This big gray dome will provide needed shelter for all those who have been sleeping on the streets. Beds are made, linens folded, and bathrooms and showers are set up to welcome 150 new residents. More than 70 are children.
And it's going to be a place where families can be, where kids can play with other children, do their homework, while parents do the very important work of finding a permanent home.
The shelter is operated by Father Joe's Villages, San Diego's largest homeless service provider. Residents will be given 3 meals a day and an array of comprehensive services.
These supportive services include therapeutic child care, integrated health care, psychiatry, addiction treatment, employment training, chaplaincy, and the wellness programs.
The shelter is temporary, scheduled to remain open for just 7 months. It was spurred from an emergency of hepatitis A and a growing street homeless population. Altogether, the 3 tents provide shelter to 700 people. Priority is given to those already signed up in a county-wide database called a coordinated entry system. It streamlines the process for transitioning people into permanent housing. San Diego City Councilman Chris Ward, whose district spans the downtown region, says the data system is helping to address homelessness. He says he's starting to see improvements, but there's still work to do.
We need to do more on street outreach. We need to work with the regional task force to make sure that our data is being optimized and we know real time where resources are available.
As city leaders celebrated the opening of the tent, 45-year-old Monique Perkins was around the corner standing against a wall beside her suitcase. She says she's on a waiting list to get into the tent, but she was told she'll have to wait a few days while families move in first.
And it's terrifying that this might be my first night that I would have to sleep on the streets with nowhere to go, so it's terrifying.
A December count of homeless people taken by the Downtown San Diego Partnership shows more than 1,000 people sleeping on the streets of downtown. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
A federal policy shift may have a major impact on California's new legalized pot law. Today, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions rescinded an Obama-era policy that kept federal authorities from cracking down on the cannabis trade in states where it's illegal. In a memo, he says federal prosecutors should decide on their own whether to devote resources to marijuana cases in their districts.
What Sessions has said is that it's up to the U.S. attorneys in each of the pot legal states to decide how they want to enforce it. So if there's a U.S. attorney in, say, Colorado or California who suddenly wants to go after the industry, there's less there to prohibit them from doing so than there was under the Obama-era guidelines.
The Obama-era policy has been in place since 2013. It's unclear how the move will affect the marijuana industry in states like California, Washington, Oregon, and others that have legalized pot. Another federal policy shift. Today, the Trump administration announced a draft plan to expand offshore oil drilling. It includes opening federal waters off the California coast for the first time in 3 decades. Governor Brown slammed the proposal in a joint statement with the governors of Oregon and Washington, saying it ignored science and the devastation of past offshore spills. A San Diego researcher says climate change may be making it harder for wide swaths of ocean to maintain proper oxygen levels. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
Scripps oceanographer Lisa Levin has studied so-called ocean dead spots for years, and she says wide swaths of water, both near shore and in the deep ocean, are not getting enough oxygen. That could hurt countries or industries that rely on a bountiful ocean for sustenance or profit. Researchers who track oxygen levels say they've been falling in the oceans since the middle of the 20th century. Levin says the gas isn't penetrating the upper water layers.
The well-oxygenated water at the surface is not mixed down into deeper water. So most of the oxygen, we have lots in the air, lots right at the surface of the ocean, but the interior of the ocean is not receiving as much of that.
Levin says nutrient-rich runoff is feeding explosions of phytoplankton, which consume oxygen near the surface. Warmer ocean temperatures also keep colder layers of deep oxygen-poor water from mixing.
What we've had over the last quarter century is a strengthening of our undercurrent. These changes in circulation may be due to global warming, quite likely, but not for sure yet.
Levin says the best way to slow or stop the trend toward more deoxygenated ocean water is to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions on a global scale and to cut down on the amount of nutrient-rich runoff entering coastal waters. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
San Diego State Assemblyman has been appointed Majority Whip at the Capitol. Todd Gloria will help senior leadership by securing votes from party members. He was elected to the Assembly in 2016. Previously, he served on the San Diego City Council and filled in as mayor following the resignation of Bob Filner. Gloria replaces former Assemblyman Raul Bocanegra, who resigned in November following allegations of sexual misconduct. Thousands of San Diegans beat the deadline to pay their property taxes before the GOP cap took effect. The county received more than 255,000 early payments before January 1st. That's about 72,000 more than the same time last year. The new tax law caps property deductions at $10,000. Many people who paid their property taxes early were looking to take advantage of the unlimited property tax deductions for federal income tax under the old set of rules. Paying off debt is a common New Year's resolution, but achieving it can be tricky. So recently I spoke to a San Diego financial planner about how to get back on track after holiday spending. I'm here with Stephen Fox. He's a certified financial planner and the founder of Next Gen Financial Planning. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Ebony.
What are some tips for getting back on track if you've overspent?
I think the first and most important thing is to first get an assessment of where you are financially and understand what the situation is. So a lot of people have accounts scattered all over the place. They might have checking accounts, savings accounts, investment accounts, 401k loans, credit cards, and everything is all over the place, and they don't have everything consolidated into one simple view where they can see everything at the same place. And getting an understanding of where you are in the first place is important to helping you get to where you want to be. So that's the first step, is figuring out what you have and what you owe and simplifying it down a little bit. The second step is to define exactly where you want to be financially in your life in the future, and then you work backwards from there to figure out how you get there.
And so once you've set your financial goals and it's time to come up with a budget, is there a formula, a template that we can all use?
As a starting point, though, you can look at rules of thumb. Like one famous one is the 50-30-20 rule, and that was originally published by Elizabeth Warren, I think. And what that means is that you take 50% of your income and you apply that towards mandatory expenses, things that you have to spend money on. So you need a place to live, you need food to eat, you need to pay your electricity bill, things like that, right? The 30% is discretionary spending. So that's things like if you have a cell phone bill, if you pay for cable TV, if you go out to eat, if you give gifts to people, if you travel. Those are all discretionary expenses that fall into the 30% category. And then the remaining 20% is for financial goals that you have. So that can be savings and investments, that can be extra payments on your debt, anything that's going to help improve the strength of your financial situation rather than spending money on something else today. So 50, 30, 20 is a good starting point for people, but then you need to make adjustments based on your individual situation and your goals.
And we've all been told it's so important to save for retirement. Is it ever okay to borrow from these retirement funds, maybe to buy your first home?
I don't think buying your first home is a good reason to. I think it should only be done in really dire circumstances where you don't have many other choices, because the cost of borrowing against your retirement account is much higher than most people realize, and it can create additional risks for you. So if you were to take out a loan of, say, $20,000 from your 401k, it costs you much more than $20,000 because of the opportunity cost of not having that money invested during the period of time that you're repaying it. Besides that, the amount you're repaying over the term of the loan is that many fewer dollars that you have able to contribute to the account in the first place and add to it. You also take on the risk of, if you leave that employer during the repayment period, you have to repay the outstanding balance of the loan immediately when you leave that employer, which is really tough for a lot of people. If you were able to do that, then you probably would have needed to take out the loan in the first place, right? And not only do you have to pay that back, but if you don't, then the balance that remains will be considered a taxable, a non-qualified taxable withdrawal. And you have to pay taxes on it, along with an additional 10% penalty if you're under age 59 and a half. So getting loans for a purpose like buying your first home is often a lot more expensive than people realize.
So wrapping up for 2018, what are your key tips for financial fitness in the new year?
I think I'll give you two different things. One of them is that people should be proactive and intentional about their spending. Don't spend money on things that aren't important to you, that don't add value to your life, that don't improve the quality of your life and aid you in the pursuit of your goals. Be intentional about your spending and know where it's going in the first place. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you feel like you've already done everything you can to trim the fat on your expenses, there's nothing else you can reasonably cut down without a whole lot of pain, then instead take a look at the income side. A lot of people drastically underestimate how much income they can actually earn. So you can do things like get additional certifications in your field of employment that might improve your income. You can seek out other jobs at other companies that might pay better, change career fields maybe, start a side business, go to college, negotiate with your boss for a raise. These are options that are often scary to people, and they underestimate how much they can actually do on the income side, but that's where I would look to.
Thank you so much, Stephen Fox, the founder of Next Gen Financial Planning.
Thanks, Ebony.
Thank you. When it comes to paying down debt, many people have a long way to go. Credit card balances in the U.S. are now at almost $800 billion. People with serious mental health challenges are at times considered to be different, dangerous, or even beyond help. And some people find that stigma exists in our healthcare system too. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg takes a look.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
When Carrie Martin was in graduate school at Harvard, she was deeply troubled.
This is an MRI image, actually, of a normal brain versus a bipolar brain.
She was suffering from bipolar disorder.
There's a difference in the gray matter in my brain.
She was struggling with her sexuality.
I have one of the best girlfriends on the planet.
To make matters worse, her mother had recently attempted suicide. One day, Martin screwed up her courage and made an appointment at Harvard's mental health clinic.
And I went in and I met with a woman who was getting her degree, I guess. And I just poured my heart out to her. I said, here's what's going on with me, my family. I think I'm gay. I'm having a real hard time with this.
When Martin got back to her apartment later that day, the therapist called her on the phone.
And she says to me, Carrie, I can't help you. And I just kind of like, I'm like, what? And she said, I can't help you. And she's like, gonna have to ring somebody else. I'm like, I thought to myself, I'm just beyond help.
Martin felt hopeless. A few months later, she tried to kill herself. Her roommate found her and called an ambulance. Martin remembers being in the emergency room, writhing around on a gurney, while a nurse was trying to stick a tube down her throat.
The nurse said to me, lay still, you did this to yourself. And I will never, ever forget that comment. It's like, you know, you want compassion, you know. Yes, I did this to myself, I guess I did. But at that moment, that's the last thing I wanted to hear.
Today, Martin runs the nonprofit Hope Exchange.
Back on meds, ?
It's a phone and text-based service that focuses on preventing suicide in the LGBTQ community and in people with bipolar disorder.
I hope everything goes like super great with her.
Martin says she tries to provide the kind of support and compassion she wished she would have gotten years ago. It's not unusual for people with a mental illness to say they felt belittled and dismissed by healthcare providers. Some believe there's a certain degree of stigma against mental illness built into the healthcare system.
They started flooding our emergency rooms.
Dr. Michael Plopper is medical director at Sharp Mesa Vista Hospital in Kearney Mesa, the largest private mental health facility in Southern California.
And we have about 400 outpatients coming every day.
He says Medicare, for example, has a lifetime cap on the number of days a person can stay in a psychiatric hospital.
Whereas that's not true for physical health. So still, to this day, Medicare discriminates in that way.
Then there's a federal policy called the IMD exclusion. It prohibits fee-for-service Medicaid programs from covering inpatient care in freestanding mental health facilities like Sharp Mesa Vista.
So what that does is it creates a logjam for these people. It creates problems in access to care for people with Medicaid. And that's a federal discriminatory law.
Our San Diego programs are recovery education based.
Judy Holder is an administrator with RI International, an agency that provides peer support services for people with mental health challenges. Years ago, Holder was in psychiatric care herself. When she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, she was struck with the stigma of low expectations.
I was basically told that it was important that I accept the fact that I was ill, accept the fact that that was who I was now, and told that I could never work again.
Holder remembers feeling worthless.
Being told to kind of accept this new life where there were no responsibilities, no expectations, was almost worse than the mental health challenges that I was experiencing.
Holder says her breakthrough came when she took a peer support class. The teacher had suffered from severe mental illness, but was high functioning and fully employed.
There was, certainly a lot of doubt on my part, but there was just that tiny glimmer of hope that said, maybe that can happen for me too.
Holder says, to be sure, there are plenty of caring and competent mental health providers. But she believes if all they see are severely troubled people, they just don't expect people to get well.
And so in order to look past that, you have to be open to the perspective that what you see is not all there is.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, I sit down with former Vice President Joe Biden to discuss foreign policy, politics, and his new book. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Now, here's a scary term. Bomb cyclone. It's also a technical term meteorologists use for a winter storm that meets a particular set of conditions. Like rapidly decreasing pressure, a storm that hit the East Coast today met that criteria, bringing frigid temperatures and lots of snow, stretching from the Carolinas all the way up to Maine. It already caused thousands of flights to be canceled, including several at San Diego International. Take a look at this weather picture over the San Diego Bay. Blue skies over the Coronado Bridge, but wet weather may move in next week. Brittany Boyer has more in tonight's forecast.
Thanks, Ebony. Well, the rainfall still staying to our north, and hopefully had a great day today. Believe it or not, today we were actually one of the warmest spots across the country, as there's a lot of cold air to the East Coast. Looking at the satellite and radar, last couple of hours we've had some clouds, a little bit of patchy fog, and also some areas of drizzle. And we still do have the opportunity for potentially some showers as we head into next week. But for tonight, increasing clouds, a low of 55 degrees. We look outside of San Diego, heading up up toward Oceanside, 43, 42 in Ramona, 50 in Borrego Springs, and we'll see a couple of patchy clouds late tonight out toward Mount Laguna. Heading into our Friday, yes, the weekend is already here, and we are still on the mild side. Dry and mild here in the southern half of the state. I was actually looking back at some data. We haven't had more than 1/10 of an inch of rain since May. So we could really use the rainfall. Unfortunately for tomorrow, it is staying off to our north, but great weather heading into the weekend here. Oceanside 70 degrees tomorrow, Alpine 74 out toward Mount Laguna. A mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures will be in the low 60s. And the snapshot this weekend, a lot of disturbances across the nation's midsection and a lot of cold air out toward the east coast. We have a nice ridge here, so that means the pleasant conditions continue here in San Diego this weekend. So out toward the coast, we'll have low clouds breaking for some sunshine tomorrow morning. Mix of sun and clouds on Saturday. Temperature-wise, we'll stay in the low 70s. And look at Tuesday. Yeah, we do have the opportunity for some rain, and that is definitely going to be welcome here across the area. Inland we go with our temperatures slightly cooler as we head into early next week, Tuesday. Again, the day that we will have to watch out for some rain, potentially some of which could be steady at times. In the mountains, more clouds and sunshine on Saturday. And we're down into the 50s Sunday and Monday, also expecting some rain here. And in the deserts, also seeing a drop-off in temperatures and maybe a shower by the time we get into Tuesday. We'll send it back to you, Ebony.
One of the ships involved in the series of collisions in the Western Pacific has departed for another tour. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh was there and has this report.
We're here at Naval Base San Diego for the departure of the USS Lake Champlain. This is the first time the Lake Champlain has left San Diego since being involved in a crash in the Western Pacific back in May.
The senior officers were disciplined after the Champlain hit a fishing boat off the Korean Peninsula. No one was injured, but this was one of 4 ship accidents that happened in 2017 in the Western Pacific. Collisions involving the USS Fitzgerald and USS McCain caused the deaths of 17 sailors. Petty Officer Freddie Medina was with the ship last May.
There's a few changes, hopefully for the better.
Yeah, more training, things like that?
More training, yes, sir.
The report blamed lack of training as one of the causes. The ship has since changed captains. In its second deployment in 6 months, the ship is returning to the Western Pacific. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Adams was seeing off her husband, holding their 2-year-old daughter.
And I know what he's going to be doing, so it's less mysterious. And but the hardest part is watching her change and learn and grow and him not being around for it.
The Lake Champlain is part of the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group. That's scheduled to leave tomorrow. This is actually the 3rd deployment in 4 years for that strike group. Reporting from Naval Base San Diego, Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
A U.S. World War II vet spent some of his downtime during the war sketching fellow soldiers. AP reporter Michael Hill says his son is now trying to get those recently rediscovered portraits to the veterans' families.
They fought for their country in World War II. Now Ira Dube is on a mission to find out who were the men in these sketches.
The probabilities of any of them still being alive would be slim to none, but I could give them to a relative, and they could see their hero when my father saw them.
Dube's father sketched more than 15 portraits of his fellow soldiers in 1943 during downtime in Hawaii. It was a year before the Army's 27th Infantry Division was decimated in the bloody Battle of Saipan. The sketches were stashed in an attic after the war, found only last year by his son. 2 sketches signed by the subjects were returned to families. The rest were recently given to the New York State Military Museum.
We will scan them and put them online on our website, hopefully, so that they can be identified by relatives.
But time is an enemy. There are fewer people left who knew the men. 94-year-old Wilfred Malo was in the same division with Dube and thousands of others. After 7 decades, he didn't recognize any of the faces.
This was a long time ago.
Old photos might hold clues. Dube is trying to find out if this upstate New York soldier was this man, but it's hard to say for sure.
We may never know who any of them are, but I think that's part of the mystery and part of the intrigue of them.
Doob hopes someone seeing these sketches for the first time might be able to unlock a piece of the puzzle and help honor the memories of these men. Michael Hill, Associated Press, Saratoga Springs, New York.
They're lucky to be alive. A pair of newborn puppies are recovering after someone tossed them into a dumpster in San Diego's Midway District. County Animal Services are reaching out to the public for information on who dumped these tiny dogs. Veterinarians are treating the King Charles Spaniels after they were found Tuesday. They say the puppies are less than 2 weeks old. A rescue group is caring for the dogs until they are old enough to be adopted. Now, here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, examining the gap between the haves and the have-nots. iNewsSource takes a closer look at income inequality in San Diego County. And on Midday Edition, get ready to rise up. The Broadway hit Hamilton arrives in San Diego. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.